Welcome back to Grandma's Sunday Dinner Table, family. We're 7 weeks into this journey through the stories that shaped us. And if you've been with us from the beginning, we've covered everything from sneaking out to stealing cookies, from breaking china to playing in makeup. But this week's story is different because it's not about one specific incident. It's about the hundreds of times we thought we were being clever. Thought we were getting away with something, thought we could fool Grandma, only to discover that she'd known what we were doing the entire time. This is the story about Grandma's seemingly supernatural ability to know everything that happened in her house, everything we did or said or planned, even when there was no possible way she could have found out. If you grew up with a black grandmother, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when you'd done something you thought was secret, and then Grandma would casually mention it 3 days later like it was no big deal, and you'd stand there with your mouth open wondering how on earth she knew. This is the story of Grandma's omniscience, her network of informants, her ability to read us like books, and how we finally learned that you can't fool someone who's been outsmarting children since before you were born. And trust me, by the end of this story, you're going to understand why we eventually stopped even trying to keep secrets from Grandma, because what's the point when she already knows everything anyway? Let me start with the first time I really understood that Grandma had powers that defied explanation. I was about 9 years old and I'd gotten in trouble at school for talking during class. Nothing major, the teacher had just given me a warning and moved my seat to the front of the classroom away from my friends. I hadn't gotten detention, hadn't gotten sent to the principal's office, hadn't even gotten a note sent home to my parents. As far as I knew, nobody outside of that classroom knew this had happened. I came home from school that day and went straight to my room to change out of my school clothes, thinking about how lucky I was that I hadn't gotten in worse trouble and that my mother would never find out. About 20 minutes later, the phone rang. I heard my mother answer it, heard her talking to someone, and then I heard the words that made my stomach drop. Is that right? Well, thank you for letting me know. I just knew. Somehow my mother had found out about the classroom incident, but who had told her? My mother called me downstairs, and when I got there, she had that look on her face that meant I was in trouble. You want to tell me about what happened at school today? She asked. I played dumb. Nothing happened at school today. Nothing? So your teacher didn't move your seat for talking during class? My mind was racing. How did she know? Who told you that? I asked. Who do you think? My mother said. And then I understood. Grandma had called her. But that made no sense. How had Grandma found out? When I got to Grandma's house the next weekend for Sunday dinner, I had to know. Grandma, I said, how did you know I got in trouble at school last week? Grandma just smiled that knowing smile and said, I know everything that happens with my grandbabies. You should remember that. But how? I pressed. Nobody called you from school. My teacher didn't tell you. How did you find out? Grandma tapped the side of her nose like she was keeping a secret. I have my ways, she said mysteriously. It wasn't until years later that I found out the truth. Grandma's best friend from church, Mrs. Johnson, worked in the school cafeteria, and Mrs. Johnson heard everything, every bit of gossip, every piece of news, every incident that happened in that school building. And what Mrs. Johnson knew, Grandma knew, because those two talked on the phone every single day. But that was just the beginning. As I got older, I discovered that Grandma's intelligence network was vast and sophisticated. She knew the crossing guard who saw us walking to and from school every day. She knew the woman who worked at the corner store where we'd buy candy. She knew the neighbors on every block between her house and ours. She knew people at church, who knew people in the community, who knew everyone's business. And all of these people, whether they realized it or not, were feeding information back to Grandma. Y'all thought I just sat in my house all day not knowing what was going on, Grandma would say when telling this story at Sunday dinner, looking around at all us grandchildren with that amused expression. Baby, I had eyes and ears everywhere. Couldn't none of y'all do nothing without me finding out about it. She'd lean back in her chair, getting comfortable because this was one of her favorite topics. Like that time some of y'all tried to skip church and go to the movies instead. Remember that? This was directed at my older cousins, who would shift uncomfortably in their seats because, yes, they remembered. Y'all told your mama you were going to church, got dressed up in your church clothes, left the house like you were headed to service, but instead of going to church, y'all went to the movie theater downtown to see whatever movie had just come out. Thought y'all were so slick. Grandma would pause here for dramatic effect. What y'all didn't know was that Sister Patterson from church saw y'all walking into that movie theater when she was driving by. And Sister Patterson called me before y'all even sat down in your seats. So I called your mama, and your mama came and picked y'all up from that movie theater before the previews were even over. Y'all didn't make it 5 minutes before y'all got caught. The whole table would laugh at this, remembering or imagining the horror of being yanked out of a movie theater by your angry mother because Grandma's church network had spotted you. Or what about the time some of y'all were supposed to be at the library studying but were actually at the park hanging out with kids I told you to stay away from? This was aimed at a different set of cousins who tried to pull this trick when they were teenagers. Y'all came home with your library books and your stories about how much studying y'all did, and I just sat there and listened to y'all lie to my face. Didn't say nothing. Let y'all think you'd gotten away with it. But I knew. Mrs. Henderson, who lives across from the park, had already called me and told me she saw y'all over there, told me who y'all were with, told me everything. Grandma would shake her head, still amazed decades later that we thought we could get away with anything. The thing y'all never understood is that in a black community, especially back then, everybody knew everybody, and everybody looked out for everybody's children. If I saw somebody else's grandchild doing something they shouldn't be doing, I'd call their grandmother, and they'd do the same for me. We had a whole network of grandmothers and mothers and aunties and church ladies keeping track of all y'all children. This was absolutely true. The concept of "it takes a village" wasn't just a saying in black communities, it was a lived reality. Adults looked out for all the children, not just their own, and information flowed freely among the elders about what the young people were up to. But Grandma's knowledge wasn't just about having informants, though that was a big part of it. She was also incredibly observant and could read people, especially her grandchildren, like books. I could tell when y'all were lying just by looking at your faces, Grandma would say. Y'all would come in here with your stories trying to explain something, and I'd just watch your face while you talked. If you couldn't look me in the eye, if you were fidgeting, if your voice got higher, if you were talking too fast or giving me too many details, I knew you were lying. She was right. Grandma had an almost supernatural ability to detect deception. You could fool your parents sometimes, you could fool teachers, you could fool other adults, but you could not fool Grandma. She'd just look at you with those knowing eyes, and you'd crack and confess everything before she even asked a question. Like that time some of y'all broke my lamp in the living room and tried to hide the pieces, Grandma continued. Y'all thought if you threw the broken pieces in the trash and put the can out by the curb before I noticed, I'd never know what happened. But I knew that lamp was gone before y'all even finished cleaning up the pieces. How? Someone at the table would inevitably ask. because this story had never been fully explained? Because I count everything in my house, Grandma would say matter-of-factly. Every lamp, every picture frame, every piece of furniture. I know what's supposed to be where. And when something's missing or moved or different, I notice immediately. Y'all thought I'm just an old woman who don't pay attention, but I notice everything. This was both impressive and slightly terrifying. The idea that Grandma had a mental inventory of every item in her house and would notice if anything changed explained so many times we thought we'd gotten away with moving something or breaking something, only to have her mention it later. Plus, Grandma would add, y'all left evidence. Thought you cleaned up all the glass, but you missed some pieces. Thought you threw away all the broken parts, but I saw them in the trash can before the garbage truck came. Y'all might have gotten away with it if you'd been more thorough, but you got sloppy. The lesson here was that Grandma was not just observant, but methodical. She checked things, she verified things. She didn't just accept our stories at face value. She looked for evidence that confirmed or contradicted what we told her. And let me tell you about the time some of y'all thought you could have a secret conversation about me while I was in the next room, Grandma said, grinning now because this was one of her favorite stories. Several of us started groaning because we knew which incident she was talking about. Y'all were in the living room, I was in the kitchen, and y'all thought because I was in the other room with the TV on, I couldn't hear you. So y'all started talking about how you were going to ask your parents if you could skip coming to my house next weekend because y'all wanted to go to some party or event or whatever it was. We could all remember this. We'd been teenagers thinking we were being quiet, thinking the TV noise would cover our conversation. What y'all didn't know is that I can hear a mouse fart in this house when I want to. These ears work just fine. So I heard every word y'all said, heard you planning how to convince your parents to let you skip, heard you complaining about having to come to boring old Grandma's house every weekend. Grandma would laugh at this part, not offended but amused by the memory. So I came into that living room and I said, y'all don't have to worry about missing next weekend because y'all aren't invited. And the look on y'all faces, like you'd seen a ghost, because y'all realized I'd heard everything. She'd shake her head, still finding it funny all these years later. Of course, I invited y'all back the next weekend. I wasn't really mad, but I needed y'all to know that you can't talk about me in my own house and think I won't hear you. Walls don't muffle sound as much as you think they do, and grandmothers have selective hearing. We can tune out noise when we want to, but we can also tune in when we need to hear what's being said. This was another lesson learned the hard way. Never assume Grandma can't hear you, and never underestimate the hearing of someone who's been listening for trouble for 60 plus years. But perhaps the most impressive demonstration of Grandma's omniscience came when several of us were teenagers and thought we'd coordinated an elaborate plan to deceive her. Y'all remember the time you tried to coordinate your stories so I wouldn't find out you'd left my house without permission? Grandma asked, looking at 4 specific cousins who'd been involved in this incident. They nodded sheepishly, knowing this story was about to get told again. These 4 were here at my house on a Saturday afternoon, supposed to be staying with me while their parents were at some event. They were probably 15, 16 years old enough to be trusted for a few hours, or so I thought. Grandma paused to take a sip of her tea. What happened was their friends called and invited them to go somewhere. I never did find out where exactly. And these 4 decided they'd sneak out of my house, go meet their friends, and be back before I noticed they were gone. But they knew I might check on them, so they came up with a plan. This plan had seemed brilliant at the time, we thought. It involved leaving a radio playing in the room we were supposed to be in. positioning pillows under blankets on the couch to look like sleeping bodies, and having the person who left last lock the door from the inside and climb out the window. They left that radio playing, thinking I'd hear music and voices and think they were in there. They made those fake sleeping bodies, thinking if I peeked in I'd see them napping and leave them alone. And they climbed out that window thinking they were so clever. Grandma's expression showed how unimpressed she'd been with this plan. First of all, I knew y'all were gone within 10 minutes. You know how I knew? Because it was too quiet. When you got 4 teenagers in a house, even if they're trying to be quiet, there's noise, there's movement, there's a sound of people living and breathing and existing in a space. That radio y'all left playing, it was playing the wrong kind of music. Y'all listened to rap and R&B. That radio was playing old school soul because that's the station I keep it on. If y'all had been in there listening to music, y'all would have changed the station. That was my first clue. The 4 conspirators looked at each other, realizing their first mistake. Second, I went to check on y'all and I saw those lumps under the blankets. Now maybe some grandmothers would have just peeked in and left, but I walked into that room and I could tell immediately those weren't bodies under there. Bodies moved, they breathed, those pillows were completely still. Plus, the shapes were wrong. Y'all didn't take the time to make them look realistic. Grandma demonstrated with her hands how the bodies had been obviously fake. Third, when I realized y'all were gone, I went to that window and saw exactly how you'd gotten out. Saw the screen was loose, saw the footprints in the dirt outside where y'all had jumped down, and that's when I got on the phone. This was the part of the story that always amazed people because what Grandma did next showed the true extent of her information network. I called Sister Patterson, who lives 2 blocks over, and I asked her if she'd seen 4 teenagers walking past her house in the last 30 minutes. She said yes, she'd seen them headed toward downtown. So I called Mrs. Henderson at the diner downtown and asked if 4 teenagers matching y'all's description had come in. She said no, but she'd keep an eye out. Then I called my friend who works at the movie theater. Then I called my neighbor who can see the park from her window. Made about 6-7 phone calls. And within 20 minutes, I knew exactly where y'all were. The grandchildren who'd been involved in this incident were shaking their heads, remembering how their perfect plan had fallen apart. Y'all were at the arcade, which I found out from Mrs. Thompson's grandson, who happened to be there and called his grandmother when he saw y'all, and his grandmother called me. So I got in my car. Yes, I drove. Even though I didn't drive much anymore by then. And I went to that arcade. I walked right up to where y'all were playing those games, and I just stood there watching until one of y'all turned around and saw me. Grandma would laugh at this memory, clearly enjoying it. I will never forget the look on y'all faces. Pure terror, because y'all thought you'd been so careful, thought you'd covered all your bases, thought you'd outsmarted your old grandmother. And there I was, standing in the arcade with my arms crossed and my purse on my arm, waiting. What did you do to them? Someone would always ask, even though we'd heard this story before. I didn't do nothing right then, Grandma said. I just said, y'all have 10 minutes to get in my car. And they did. They left their friends, came outside, got in my car, and we drove home in complete silence. Didn't say a word the whole way. The silence, apparently, had been worse than any lecture. When we got home, I sat them down and I said, y'all thought you could fool me. Thought you could sneak out of my house and I wouldn't know. But let me explain something to you. I've been catching sneaky children for 40 years. I raised 6 children of my own, who all tried to pull the same kinds of stunts y'all try. Y'all think you invented sneaking out? Y'all think you invented lying and making up stories? I wrote the book on that. I know every trick because I've seen every trick. And I have something y'all don't have. experience, patience, and a whole community of adults who helped me keep track of y'all. This speech had become legendary in the family, quoted and paraphrased at various times when younger kids thought they were being clever. I told them, from now on, you want to go somewhere, you ask me. You tell me where you're going, who you're going with, when you'll be back, and if I say no, you accept it and you don't try to sneak around. Because I will find out. I always find out, and the punishment for sneaking will always be worse than if you just asked permission in the first place. This was the core of Grandma's philosophy about dealing with teenagers and their inevitable desire for independence and freedom. She wasn't unreasonable. She'd often say yes to requests if we asked properly and gave her the information she needed. But trying to trick her or sneak around behind her back was a guaranteed way to lose privileges and trust. And you know what? Grandma would conclude. After that day, those four never tried to sneak out again. They learned that it wasn't worth it, that Grandma was going to find out anyway, so you might as well be honest from the start. The four in question would nod, confirming this was true. The thing y'all eventually figured out, Grandma would say, addressing all of us grandchildren but really speaking to everyone at the table, is that I wasn't trying to control you or keep you from having fun or make your lives miserable. I was trying to keep you safe. I needed to know where you were and who you were with because that's my job as your grandmother. And the only way I could do that job was by knowing everything, by having people I trusted keeping an eye on y'all, by being observant enough to notice when something was off, by being experienced enough to spot a lie when I heard one. She'd soften here, wanting us to understand the love behind the surveillance. And if that meant y'all thought I had supernatural powers, or that I could read minds, or that I knew everything, well, that was fine with me. Because if y'all believed I knew everything, you'd be less likely to try to get away with dangerous stuff. You'd think twice before doing something you shouldn't because you'd know Grandma would find out. This was the strategic genius of Grandma's approach. By cultivating an image of omniscience, she deterred bad behavior before it happened. We'd think about doing something wrong, then think about how Grandma would inevitably find out and decide it wasn't worth the risk. Did I actually know everything? Grandma would admit. No, I'm sure y'all got away with some things I never found out about, but I knew enough that y'all thought I knew everything, and that was just as good. She'd smile, satisfied with how well this strategy had worked. And now y'all are parents yourselves, and I see you trying the same tricks with your own children, building your own networks, paying attention to details, making your kids think you know everything even when you don't. Because you learned from me that children who think their parents know everything are less likely to try dangerous things. It's not about actually being all-knowing. It's about creating the perception that you are. This was the wisdom we'd carried forward into our own parenting, that attention to detail, that network of other parents and teachers and community members who shared information, that ability to read body language and tone of voice to detect lies, that willingness to verify stories instead of just accepting them at face value. And whenever our own children tried to pull something over on us, whenever they thought they were being sneaky, we'd channel Grandma's energy. We'd let them think they'd gotten away with it for a day or two, gathering information. And then we'd casually mention what they'd done, watching their faces as they realized we'd known all along. And we'd say the same thing Grandma used to say, I know everything that happens with my children. You should remember that. The legacy of Grandma's omniscience lived on in how we parented, how we stayed connected to our communities, how we built networks of trust with other parents so we could all keep our children safe together. It lived on in our understanding that children need both freedom and accountability, independence and oversight, trust and verification. And it lived on in the stories we told at family gatherings, laughing about all the times we thought we'd fooled Grandma, only to discover she'd known everything the whole time and was just waiting for the right moment to reveal her knowledge and teach us a lesson we'd never forget. Did your grandmother seem to know everything? How did she find out about things you thought were secret? What tricks did the elders in your family use to keep track of what you were doing? Share your stories in the comments below. We want to hear about your grandmother's mysterious powers. And make sure you subscribe because next Sunday we've got another story from Grandma's table. We're going to tell you about the advice Grandma gave us over greens and cornbread that we finally understand now that we're grown. You don't want to miss that wisdom. Hit that subscribe button and we'll see you next Sunday at Grandma's table.